everyone. Welcome to the Private Banking Wealth Management Hotseat. With me today, we have Parsa Khoshdel. So Parsa is the expert at Synpulse on the topic around operational risk management and also conduct risk. So we are going to be spending a bit of time speaking to Parsa on the same. Welcome, Parsa.
Thank you for having me.
So Parsa, I know operational risk management is a rather wide topic. Right. So to me, in order to make it a bit more interesting for the audience, I thought let's take a focus area, which is around client-related aspects. So which is conducting business with clients, which in the larger context also includes relationship managers. Could you maybe explain to us on what is the nature of the risk management challenge that the banks are actually facing in this space?
Sure, happy to. The challenges that the banks face have a couple of root causes that we see in the past 10 years coming up. On one hand, you have the ever-evolving regulatory environment, where you have examples such as MAS guidelines on fair dealings that came out very recently, or a couple of years ago when MAS was talking about the emphasis that they have on individual accountability and holding banks accountable, especially the supervisors, with regards to the outcome of their risk management practices. Now, that's on one hand. On the other hand, you have increase in business volume and increase in complexity of the ways by which the banks conduct their business. You can think about the new channels. 10 years ago, there was no getting instructions via WeChat, for example, or there was no online communications with regards to trade instructions or disclosure of certain suitability requirements via digital platforms. But now we have all these channels. And the banks, knowing what the regulatory expectations are, they perceive it as directly correlating with more controls and with more resources put into this. But at the same time, we see a lot of people, the C-suite management, looking at this as an ever-growing cost for the organization. So the banks are asking this question to themselves: that where does it end? We have been investing more and more, and we've been adding more and more controls, and we've been increasing the size of our team that is executing these controls. So where does it end? So many are struggling with this rather philosophical question that why do we have these controls in the first place? And isn't a control in place to ultimately mitigate residual risk? Now, residual risk is usually coming out of one of the two things. It's either operational errors, such as fat finger problems, or just forgetting to disclose the third decimal point of a trade settlement, or in a more severe case, you have conduct risk issues, people deliberately not following the process, which is a much bigger problem. And the banks are now at a crossroads on how to handle these issues. Should we continue throwing more warm bodies at these problems and spend more time at it? Or is there a better way to do this?
Interesting. You mentioned the word conduct risk. So the question comes, how do you even measure conduct?
That's a very good question. And again, a rather philosophical one. The reality is that the banks have been trying to measure conduct risk for years. In the past 10, 15 years that I've at least had the pleasure of being in the industry, I've realized that everybody is trying to find proxies by which they can measure conduct. So if you look at early 2010s or before that, conduct risk was measured by purely looking at the control results. But the downside of that activity is that you have a reactive approach towards risk management, meaning that you have these controls post-mortem. You look at, okay, who is having the highest control failure? Who are the individuals who are having biggest problems? Then we go to them and say, okay, you had this problem. Can we remediate it? Then next month comes another batch of control results. Then we repeat the cycle again and again. So it's this never-ending cycle of identifying issues, remediating it, closing it. But before we know it, next month comes up, and we're just playing this game of whack-a-mole with risk issues in the organization. Now, gradually in the 2010s, especially towards mid-2010s, we noticed some of the leaders, market leaders in the private banking industry move towards having elements such as balanced scorecards or risk KPI topics to try to leverage data analytics as much as possible to form a holistic view on RM's behavior. But that the underlying data that they were using was still very much reliant on the control results, which was still post-mortem. But what we see now, the industry moving towards, is to leverage on the vast opportunities that advanced data analytics and AI and machine learning brings to the table, to really be able to look at the symptoms of certain behaviors, and look at and have a holistic way of looking at the conduct risk of a conduct risk of an individual. So we don't look at individual controls anymore, but we look at the individual's behavior over a period of time holistically, and using that we can actually at times predict their behavior in the future. So in terms of having that reactive approach, we have a more predictive view on how to manage the risk.
Interesting. So maybe to appreciate the context of the response, could you state an example of what do you mean by a holistic way of how you can detect it without using specific controls? Maybe an example?
Absolutely. So give you an example. If you think about a relationship manager who has, who let's say is on top of the list in terms of the revenue generation and bringing in new clients. And if you look at most of their portfolios under their management, you may find that they're actually doing pretty well. But if you zoom a little bit deeper, you realize that maybe a good portion of their vulnerable clients under that relationship manager are incurring significant losses over time. At the same time, what if I tell you that most of the trades that are advised to that particular clientele that are more vulnerable are in direct contradiction with the CIO in-house view? If I give more context to this by saying that on the KYC side of things, for just bringing in net new money, this particular relationship manager has been skipping enhanced due diligence for a lot of high-risk clients, or has not done a very good job in the quality of the KYC process. That adds another element to it. Then if I also share that there is a significant number of outstanding client complaints against this particular relationship manager, then that adds another layer to it. Now you see where I'm going with this. Each and every one of these elements, they are coming from different angles. Traditionally, you had different controls in silo that they were looking at this. But now, using advanced analytics, we try to bring all of these things together. But now, once we form a profile on the particular relationship manager, we use that behavior and we use the trajectory of that behavior to predict how they're going to behave in the coming months. And by raising that alert to the line managers and to the senior management, we enable them to prevent things from getting worse, prevent client litigation and so on before it becomes a problem. Now imagine you overlay whatever I just mentioned with a technology such as automated communication surveillance, voice to text, text mining, and so on. Then you have a scenario whereby you don't need to have 50 controls looking at individual trades, whether somebody followed the process the way they should have. You actually have a holistic view on the RM's conduct risk. Yes, you can still have your mechanical checks that are necessary just to make sure things are running smoothly, but you can automate a lot of them via automated communication surveillance. But the vast majority of the resources that are spending their time just reviewing call reports or listening to tapes and all these things can actually be redeployed to look at things a little bit more holistically and a little bit more in depth to identify ultimately what is the root cause of the issue. Because if I may go back to what the regulators are asking about, what we also see is in the past 10 plus years, the regulations are becoming a lot less prescriptive and a lot more talking about, okay, the overall expectation that the regulator has from how we should treat our clients, right? And this approach enables us to really look at the spirit of the regulation and say, okay, we are adhering to what the regulation wants for us to be fair to our clients or advise them the way we should. Not to spend so much time on trying to figure out whether the third decimal point of a trade was stated correctly or not. Because yes, that's an operational problem, but that's not what is going to make or break the bank's regulatory profile in terms of adherence to the regulatory requirements.
Excellent. You spoke a lot about data analytics and more forward-looking views that analytics can help generate. Now, pivoting towards the more softer side of conduct, because one of the things that I heard from a very proud private bank from Switzerland is that culture matters a lot, significantly, quite a bit. Even if you have lapse in controls and processes, culture has the power to cover for it. So how do you address the softer element to awareness towards setting the right tone, cultural aspects towards the organization, especially if you can contrast more evolving market in Asia and the behaviors and the way that you actually see? Do you see it also as an area of importance that the banks need to address? Are they also doing something about it? And maybe if you can speak a few words towards it.
Absolutely. I think the answer to your question lies within the question that you asked yourself, that the most important thing in risk culture programs is tone from the top, is how the senior management sets the tone for the organization in terms of, are we going to have a punitive sort of approach towards risk management, or are we going to have more carrots than sticks? And that is the approach that many of the leading banks are taking towards making sure that the framework that we have is transparent to everyone. So a lot of the what I just mentioned before about the data analytics solutions and so on doesn't need to necessarily be a black box that is only being used by risk managers. It can be made open and transparent towards the front office as well, so they know what they're being measured against. A lot of times what we hear from front office is, when I'm doing my day-to-day activities, I feel like I'm walking into a minefield. I don't know, okay, if I say this one incorrectly, what's going to happen? If I miss this particular disclosure, what's going to happen? So how can we make sure that we shift away the bank's focus by trying to focus on digitization as much as possible? So when it comes to disclosures, try to go through the digital channels as much as possible to reduce the human error factor, and at the same time demonstrate to the organization, to the front office, that we are not penalizing folks for missing the rudimentary stuff. Yes, it's important to pay attention, but our focus at the end of the day is on holistic conduct risk review. If everybody's following the process the way they should, and if everybody's following the process with integrity, there's not much to worry about as a relationship manager. And that's the key message that needs to come, going back to what the start of my response, goes back to the tone from the top.
Understood. So you mentioned carrot and stick. Could you maybe give an example of what a carrot could look like? Simply because from my experience, it's always been about sticks. You don't do something, then you get penalized. You get less bonus, less compensation, you get some points. Could you speak a bit more about the carrot element?
Well, the carrot element, the stick, it all depends on how we organize the overall KPI and the let's say the remuneration package that we have at the end of the day. The same way that you can say, if you miss X, Y, and Z, we're going to slash your bonus. You can flip the script on its head by saying that, okay, everyone as a part of their appraisal process, for example, there is an element of risk KPI that if you score really well on it, you will actually be compensated for it and you will actually be rewarded for it. It's not necessarily that, okay, everybody has X by default as bonus, and then whatever you miss is going to just chip away from that X. It can be that everybody is maybe 50% of X. Now, if you do well, you can actually bring that 50% to 100%. If you don't do so well, that 50% can go down to 0%. So that's the idea. By having having a consistent framework that applies to everyone, not necessarily just a particular team or just front office. It can be applied to the assistant relationship managers, everybody who's dealing with the clients. So everybody understands that we are all in this together, and if our team fails, it will impact our overall compensation at the end of the year as well.
Excellent. Thanks for the answer. And I'm just wondering, based on what you see in the industry and the players, are Are the banks more or less starting to do this? Are they doing it? Are they behind, especially when it comes to really those forward-looking aspects that you mentioned around conduct risk? Maybe if you can explain to me the maturity of the current industry levels, and if there are even attempts that are being made in heading towards that direction. Do you even have any best practices to share from any of the banks?
Well, I mean, like every other evolution of the market, there are different banks are at different levels of maturity in this process. We see some of the more market leaders on the more international side having embarked on this journey since mid 2015s, while some of the more local banks trying to catch up. But the interesting thing about this is because of the fact that some of the local banks in the region trying to catch up with this problem, they may be approaching a greenfield approach, meaning that since they didn't have anything before, they don't need to necessarily readjust their existing frameworks, and they can start off skip the part that I mentioned before about balance scorecard and risk KPI and all these things, and go straight away to the target state, which is looking at holistic conduct risk review.
And end state, how does it look like? No controls at all? Are you saying that there is a world in which you don't need to start measuring certain things on processes and controls? Or how does the end state look like? How extreme can it be?
Well, if I can dream about a target state in the next 10 years, the ideal state for me would be obviously automating as much all the mechanical checks to be automated as much as possible, and moving all the ex post, or rather post event controls to pre-trade checks as much as possible and automate them. So for example, traditionally we had disclosures on suitability that required to be done upon placing a trade. If we move all of these trades, all of these disclosures to a digital channel and automate it for every trade that is being processed, you don't even need to have a control in the first place because everything is automated. So moving everything to the digital channels as much as possible, completely eliminating the human factor and the fat finger problems as much as possible. But at the end of the day, there is still a demand for risk managers who can exert their judgment on the outcome of the holistic conduct risk review. Meaning that I still believe that risk management, first line and second line of defense, still play an integral part in making sure that the front office is still on the right track from a risk culture and conduct perspective, but it is still, but their focus is no longer checking on rudimentary things. All of those elements are either handled via digital pre-trade disclosures or handled via post-trade automated communication surveillance. And then all the more complex and more softer elements of it is captured using AI and machine learning techniques. But at the end of the day, a human being, someone who is a seasoned risk manager, comes in and looks into the outcome of that and exert their judgment on making sure that, okay, is this a real case or is this something that we can live with as a bank?
Great, thanks a lot. And now speaking of buzzwords, since you mentioned analytics a few times, what does GenAI got to do with anything that you mentioned? Does it play a role? If yes, what would an ideal state look like if you leverage GenAI?
Well, to be honest, it's too early to say. There are so many use cases that are being prototyped and that are being used, that are being trialed in the industry. But something that we have been consistently working on right now is to really try to focus on leveraging GenAI to give us the insights that we're looking for without having to ask an individual to learn how to work with, let's say, the data analytics tool that we're providing them with. So, because obviously the more complex our algorithms and the more complex the data analytics solution is, the more times it takes for an individual to be trained on it, on how to use the system properly. But if we have a solution that enables us to prompt certain things that say, okay, in team X, who are the top individuals who are having the biggest conduct risk issues in the area of AML KYC, and he immediately can give me back the answer, then you eliminate that element of learning how to deal with this solution as well. That's just one example of it. It's rather a new topic in the industry. Like I said, there's a lot happening in the market. It's too early to call, but at least one area that we are focusing on a lot is to leverage GenAI as much as possible to have that sort of prompt setup that enables us to extract the insights traditionally you may need to click on 10 different things to extract it and infer it. You can basically ask the question and then get the answer right away.
Thanks a lot, Parsa. We are moving to the last section of the discussion. Is there any specific aspects that you believe is still important that we have not managed to cover as a part of this conversation that you would like to share?
I think the conversation that we had today, obviously by nature, because the short video, we only managed to scratch the surface on this topic. There's so much more intricate details about how you implement such a framework that we discussed today. But we can, based on our experience in the market and what we see, what the first movers are experiencing, it's definitely worth every penny and every hour that you spend on this, because of the fact that it enables us as a bank to, having a preventive measures enables us to avoid a lot of the severe outcomes such as client litigation or regulatory fines and so on. So it is definitely worth looking into, but the devil is in the details on such conversations. So I would encourage all our listeners to let us know if they would like us to cover a particular topic on this, or if they have any thoughts on this, leave it in the comment section, and we'll be more than happy to cover it in our next session.
Parsa, thanks a lot for those comments. To me, I fully understand and appreciate the statement that you made. Some of the institutions that I've been observing that are a bit ahead in investing in the space have already started to see results, and even some forward-looking cases on litigations, client complaints that they were potentially able to prevent. So thanks a lot for that. And thanks again for making time. And to me, more towards the broader audience, I hope you found the content interesting and useful. And if you have any additional topics, any comments towards what we are discussing, anything else that you would like to cover, please also share with us in the comment section, and hopefully we can cover it in the next sessions. Thanks a lot for your time.